When billionaire Daniel Westbrook made a stop at a dusty roadside gas station with his twin daughters, he noticed a homeless girl who looked exactly like them. That eerie resemblance set off a chain of events, uncovering a long-buried family secret, a dark betrayal, and a fight for love, legacy, and the fate of 3 young lives. But before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to say hi. Now let's begin. The Nevada sun scorched the sky like a blazing furnace, turning the faded highway into a wavy mirage of heat. Daniel Westbrook, 42, stepped out of his polished black Escalade at the worn-down gas station. A blast of dry desert wind struck his face. He tugged at his designer polo shirt, already damp despite the icy air conditioning in the car. The harsh scent of burning asphalt hung in the air as he squinted up at the worn-out sign barely clinging to the rooftop. Elko Gas in Mart. "Dad, I'm thirsty," Lily whined from the back seat, her cheeks flushed. Blonde curls stuck to her sweaty forehead. "Me too." "It's boiling," Hannah chimed in, her identical twin, using her sun hat to fan herself. Daniel forced a smile. "Just a quick stop, girls. I'll fill the tank, then we'll grab something cold." He hadn't planned to stop here, but the fuel gauge had been flirting with empty for the past 10 miles. The gas pump clicked off with a loud metallic clunk, jolting Daniel out of his thoughts. He wiped the sweat off his brow, the relentless desert heat pushing down on him. The gas station was weathered, peeling paint, dusty windows, the kind of place his luxury motorcade would usually bypass without a second glance. But today was different. Today he was traveling solo, just him and his daughters. A business trip had turned into something deeper, something personal, ever since Jessica's passing. From the open car window, Lily's excited voice cut through the stillness. "Daddy, look over there." Daniel glanced up from the pump, following, Lily's pointed finger toward the station's entrance. Hannah, seated beside her twin, had her face pressed against the glass, eyes wide, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. Daniel squinted through the blinding glare, and then froze. Sitting quietly on the cracked concrete under a rusted "No Loitering" sign was a little girl. Her clothes were filthy and baggy, her shoes worn through, and in her small hands she clutched a battered gray stuffed bunny. But it wasn't her condition that knocked the air from Daniel's lungs. It was her face. She didn't just resemble Lily and Hannah. She was their mirror image. Same pale golden curls brushing at the ends, same piercing blue eyes heavy with exhaustion, same tiny nose and chin, same lips. Identical. For a moment, Daniel thought the heat was messing with his vision. He blinked hard, but nothing changed. "Daddy," Hannah whispered this time, her voice trembling with awe and confusion. "She looks just like us." Daniel's heartbeat roared in his ears. He stepped away from the pump slowly, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. The girl, sensing his movement, lifted her head. Their eyes met, and in that moment, time seemed to bend in on itself. There was something in her gaze, a spark, a quiet light he had seen every single day since his daughters were born. That sharp, steady mind. That quiet strength. She didn't look frightened, just alert, maybe wary, certainly tired, but not afraid. Daniel opened the car door and leaned in. "Girls, stay here." "Is she our sister?" Lily asked softly. "Is she our sister?" "I don't know," Daniel replied, though even he didn't fully believe his own words. "But I have to find out." As he walked across the pavement, his heart pounding, the little girl slowly rose to her feet, clutching the rabbit even tighter. She looked no older than 9, but her posture was tense, like someone who had been shooed away too many times. Daniel moved toward her with slow, careful steps. The small girl sat just outside the gas station's entrance on the cracked concrete. The Nevada heat rippled off the ground, but she remained still, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around a well-worn stuffed rabbit missing one ear. Her frame was thin and covered in grime, her bare feet thick with dust and dirt. But it was her face, so hauntingly familiar, that made Daniel's world tip off balance. Lily and Hannah had quietly followed, their curiosity too strong to hold back. Daddy, Lily whispered, squeezing his hand tighter. She looks exactly like us. Daniel crouched down to her level, his heart beating so hard he could barely hear his own voice. Hi there, he said gently, a soft smile tugging at his lips. What's your name? The girl slowly lifted her head, her pale blue eyes meeting his, and for a heartbeat everything around them fell silent. Looking into her eyes was like staring into a reflection of his daughter's, the delicate jawline, the petite nose, the faint freckles across her cheeks. Every feature was undeniably theirs, undeniably his. My name's Grace, she murmured, her voice faint and dry as though it hadn't been used in days. Are you going to tell me to leave? The question hit Daniel straight in the chest. The way she asked, quiet, defeated, already prepared for rejection, shattered something deep inside him. No, he said firmly. No one is making you leave. Grace blinked up at him as if unsure whether to trust what she'd just heard. She hugged the rabbit closer. I can't stay much longer, she said. The man inside said I was scaring customers. Daniel swallowed hard. Are you by yourself? He asked, already fearing the answer. Grace nodded. Grandma Rose used to take care of me, she said quietly. But she got really sick last week and then she didn't wake up. Her voice cracked. I waited, but she never woke up. Silence followed. Hannah stepped forward and pointed to her own face. You look exactly like us, she said. Show her, Lily. The three girls stood side by side and Daniel felt his knees weaken. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was perfect. Every freckle, every sun-bleached strand of hair. Identical. He struggled to breathe as his mind raced to understand what he was seeing. Grace looked between the girls and then up at Daniel, her face caught between fear and hope. Do you know my daddy? She asked softly. Grandma Rose said, My mama's in heaven. She never told me anything about him. Daniel's throat tightened. Something shifted deep inside him, clicking into place. He didn't care what hospital records said, or how impossible this looked. He knelt down, brushing a piece of dirt-smudged hair from Grace's cheek. Would you like to come home with us, Grace? He asked, voice shaking. Just until we figure things out. Grace slowly nodded, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Okay, she whispered, and in that moment, Daniel knew everything was about to change. Daniel Westbrook sat at the edge of the leather couch in his private study, hands trembling slightly as he held a sealed envelope. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor, but he didn't notice the light. Outside, Lily and Hannah played quietly in the garden, unaware that their world was on the brink of change. And Grace was upstairs, curled up in the guest room, holding her tattered stuffed rabbit. She was still too shy to ask for anything, still unsure of her place in this world. Daniel took a deep breath and opened the envelope. Inside were the DNA results, clear, clinical, undeniable. The first sentence knocked the breath from his lungs. Subject A, B, and C are genetically identical. Probability of shared maternity and paternity, 99.999%. Lily, Hannah, Grace, triplets. Daniel's heart pounded so hard it drowned out the ticking clock on the wall. He read the report again, this time slower, hoping he'd misread something. But the science was clear. The little girl who had been living on the streets, scavenging food, sleeping on concrete, was his daughter, and he had missed her entire life. A knock startled him. Dr. Martinez, the family physician, stepped into the study. His usual calm demeanor was there, but something in his expression was tight. I know it's a lot to take in, the doctor said softly, but the test is conclusive. All three girls are genetically identical. Daniel stood up slowly. This can't be right. I was there when Jessica gave birth. I held them, both of them. There were only two. Dr. Martinez hesitated, shifting his weight. I've already contacted the hospital where the girls were born. I asked them to send the original delivery records. He paused. What I found, Daniel, there are discrepancies. Daniel stared at him. What kind of discrepancies? The doctor's tone dropped. Altered entries. The original labor notes mention the delivery of 3 infants, but the official file now lists only 2. Someone went into the hospital system and changed the records. This wasn't a mistake. Daniel felt like the ground had vanished beneath him. Who would do something like that? The doctor met his eyes. Someone with high-level access at the time of the birth. You, Jessica. Or your Uncle Charles. The name hit Daniel like a cold wind. He stumbled back into his chair, the report falling from his hands. No. Why would anyone? But even as he asked, the pieces started falling into place. The hushed talks Charles had with Jessica behind closed doors. How he always insisted on managing the hospital paperwork, the grip he tightened after Jessica's death. Controlling. Always controlling. Daniel closed his eyes, drowning in guilt and rage. Someone had taken Grace from him. Someone had left her to survive on the streets, while her sisters grew up in warmth and privilege, and now that someone had a name, Charles Westbrook, his uncle, chairman of Westbrook Industries, the family patriarch ever since Daniel's father passed. Uncle Charles, Daniel whispered, his voice dry. The man had always been calculated, always pragmatic. He believed in legacy and control, not in love or emotion. Charles had built and run the family empire with an iron fist for decades, gradually handing the reins to Daniel. But could he have done something this cruel? The thought chilled Daniel to his core. He stood, gripping the desk edge for support. Anger simmered beneath his disbelief. If Charles had known, if he had done this, then Grace had spent 9 years alone, abandoned, sleeping on concrete, because of him. The study door swung open without a knock. In walked Charles, composed as ever, dressed in a sharp navy blazer, his silver hair neatly brushed back. He moved with the ease of a man who believed every outcome was under his command. I heard you brought a stray child into the household, he said. Charles spoke with ease as he settled into the leather chair across from Daniel's desk. Very noble, he said casually, but let's not get dramatic. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he slid the DNA report across the desk. Charles's eyes flicked over the document for a split second, just long enough for Daniel to notice. Something shift in his uncle's face, not surprise, recognition. And that realization made Daniel's stomach turn. I see, Charles said evenly, pushing the papers back toward him. But I hope you've considered the consequences. Bringing in another heir, especially one with no documented background, it complicates estate matters. And believe me, Daniel, that's not something to take lightly. Daniel's blood boiled. Now it was clear. His uncle had known all along. Someone within this very family had taken his daughter from him. You changed the hospital records, didn't you? Daniel snapped. A flicker, just a brief twitch, in Charles's eyes. But it was enough. What exactly are you accusing me of? He asked coldly. Daniel leaned forward, his voice sharp and controlled. Jessica gave birth to 3 girls. You knew that, and you made sure one of them disappeared. Charles's smile thinned, almost like he pitied him. You were in shock that night, Daniel. Jessica was bleeding badly. The doctors weren't sure she'd make it. You weren't in a state to make decisions. Someone had to. Decisions like stealing my daughter? Daniel's voice cracked. No, Charles snapped, his voice sharpening. Decisions like avoiding a public meltdown, a premature birth, 3 infants in unstable condition. It could have become a media disaster, a scandal that would have derailed your company's launch. One more child, one more liability, and it would have been too much. I protected your future. Daniel's fists clenched against the desk, his knuckles bone white. You didn't protect anyone. You destroyed a life. You let Jessica die thinking she had only twins. Charles stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. Be very careful, nephew. Some truths are better left hidden. This discovery of yours, it threatens everything we've built. As the door clicked shut behind him, Daniel sat still, glaring at the records in front of him. His heart thundered with anger and grief. Grace hadn't just been forgotten, she had been erased. And the one who did it wasn't a stranger. It was family, his own blood. And this was only the beginning. The Westbrook estate looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Towering hedges, blooming rose gardens, and a marble staircase that curled skyward like it touched the clouds. But for Grace there was no magic in it. The silence inside the grand mansion pressed against her like a weight. She held her worn-out rabbit plush close to her chest, as if it could explain the nervous pounding in her heart. "This is your room," Lily announced, her voice full of excitement as she threw open the door with a proud wave of her arm. The room was enormous. Walls painted a soft blush pink, a canopy bed draped in silk, fairy lights twinkling across the ceiling. To Lily, it was paradise. Grace just stared. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice shaking more with uncertainty than wonder. That first week in the Westbrook mansion became a quiet war of adjustment. Grace refused to sleep in the bed, instead dragging her blanket and stuffed rabbit into the far corner of the room, curling up on the hardwood floor as though the softness of a mattress wasn't meant for her. In the kitchen, she slipped slices of bread and bananas into her backpack while the chef pretended not to notice. At dinner, she hardly touched her plate and often asked to eat alone in her room. One evening, Daniel noticed grapes and crackers tucked into her sweater pocket. "She won't eat with us," Hannah whispered to Margaret, the housekeeper, as Grace walked out with her untouched food again. "Change is hard, sweetheart," Margaret replied gently. "She's still learning she's safe. That takes time." At first, Lily and Hannah were fascinated with their new sister. They braided each other's identical golden hair, held mirrors side by side, and giggled at how perfectly their faces matched. But fascination soon turned into frustration. Grace didn't understand their board games. She flinched whenever someone raised their voice. She didn't laugh at cartoons. She never played with the extravagant dollhouse Daniel had bought last Christmas. "She's weird," Hannah muttered one afternoon as Grace walked away silently during dress-up. "She doesn't know how to have fun." Daniel, who had been watching from the window, spoke before Margaret could respond. "She knows how to survive," he said softly. "That's something you two have never had to learn." His words lingered in the air as he watched Grace kneel in the flower bed. She wasn't picking flowers. She simply held the soil in her hands like it anchored her. Her small shoulders stayed tight, as if she was always waiting for something bad to happen. Daniel's heart ached. This wasn't the childhood she deserved, but beneath all that fear, he also saw something else in her. A strength Lily and Hannah hadn't yet known. A strength born from survival. He knew if he truly wanted to help her feel safe, he had to give her the time to learn how. "Grace," Daniel said softly, crouching down beside her in the garden. She flinched. "It's okay. It's just me," he whispered gently, keeping his voice calm and his hands in plain sight. She didn't reply for a while. Her lips trembled. Her tiny hands clutched the rabbit tighter. "He's coming back," she finally whispered, voice trembling. "The man, in the suit." Daniel's chest tightened. He fought to keep his face calm. "Who, sweetheart?" he asked quietly. "The man with the silver hair," she said. "He wore a suit." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Can you tell me more about him?" he asked carefully. Grace hesitated. "He used to come to our trailer when Grandma Rose got really sick. He had shiny shoes and always smelled like mint. Grandma told me not to talk to him. She said he was dangerous." Daniel couldn't breathe. "Did he ever hurt you?" "No," Grace answered. "But he asked a lot of questions about me, about where I came from. After that, Grandma started locking the doors, even during the day." As she spoke, her voice began to shake more, her words spilling faster like she'd been holding them in for years. "She told me if anything happened to her, I had to run, and not to trust men in suits, especially the ones with gray hair." Daniel's fist curled tight against his knee. It had to be Charles. Every word, every warning. It all traced back to him. Grace looked up, her eyes shimmering with tears. Do you think he's mad that I found you? No, Daniel said firmly, placing a hand gently over hers. He doesn't get to be mad, and he doesn't get to hurt you. Not ever again. You're safe now, Grace. You're not alone. She gave a tiny nod, but her small body still trembled. Daniel lifted her into his arms, holding her like he used to hold Lily and Hannah when they were little. Her weight was light, but the burden she carried was heavier than anything he'd ever known. As he held her close, Grace whispered, "Grandma always said, the truth comes out, even when people try to bury it." Daniel stared into the darkness beyond her window. "She was right," he whispered, "and we're going to uncover it, every last bit of it." He tucked her into bed and remained beside her until her breathing slowed, the tension in her face finally easing. But inside Daniel, a storm had begun to build, and this one wasn't going to fade quietly. Daniel had barely begun adjusting to life with Grace when fate placed another weight on his heart. During a routine visit to one of his foundation's partner shelters, his eyes were drawn to a fragile girl sitting quietly in a corner, her arms protectively wrapped around a younger boy's shoulders. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her hair was tangled, dark, and her intelligent, wary eyes tracked every movement in the room. The boy, maybe 6, clung to her like a shadow. Thin cheeks, worn-out clothes haunted silence. "They've been here 2 days," the shelter director whispered. "Found hiding behind a dumpster downtown. No ID, no known relatives." Something inside Daniel stirred, an ache he couldn't ignore. He knelt in front of the children and offered a warm, gentle smile. "What are your names?" The girl held the boy even tighter. "I'm Maylene," she said cautiously. "This is my brother, Noah. We don't need help." But Daniel could see that they did. That same night, he brought them home to the Westbrook estate. Grace watched them silently from the staircase, instantly recognizing Maylene's guarded stance, the way her eyes flicked toward every door, always calculating the nearest escape. Noah barely spoke. He stuck to Maylene like glue, flinched at sudden sounds and avoided eye contact altogether. The next morning, Daniel walked into the kitchen at sunrise and froze. Maylene was near the pantry, stuffing bread rolls into the pockets of her sweatshirt. Her hands moved fast, precise, like someone who had done this countless times. When she noticed him, her face went pale. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'll put them back, just please don't punish Noah. He didn't know." "I'm not angry," Daniel said softly, stepping closer. "But why are you hiding food?" Maylene hesitated, then dropped her voice to a whisper. "In case Derek finds us." Daniel's stomach turned. "Derek?" She nodded slowly. "Sometimes he'd lock us in a room for days. Noah gets really sick when he's hungry. I just wanted to be ready." Daniel crouched, voice steady, though rage burned behind his eyes. "There's always food here, Maylene. You don't ever need to hide it again. He can't hurt you anymore." But Daniel knew it wasn't that simple. Trauma didn't vanish just because safety arrived. That day he watched as Maylene moved through the house like a soldier on alert, mapping every room, every adult. She never let Noah out of her sight, even waiting outside the bathroom while he used it. Noah startled at every sound, a dropped spoon, a loud laugh. He whispered apologies over spilled water, giggled too hard, or reached for a toy. That evening at dinner, as they sat around a table full of warm food and soft conversation, Noah looked up at Daniel and asked, "Mr. Daniel, why are you being nice to us? What do you want us to do for you?" Daniel froze, slowly setting down his fork. That question broke something in him. "I don't want anything from you, Noah," he said gently. "Sometimes people help just because it's the right thing to do." Noah frowned. "But Derek said we always had to earn our keep, that no one helps for free." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. Derek was wrong about a lot of things. He reached across the table and took both of their hands in his. "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." The calm of the Westbrook estate shattered like glass one quiet Thursday afternoon. Daniel was reviewing final blueprints for the new Westbrook Children's Hospital when Mrs. Langley, his longtime house manager, burst into his office. Her usually composed face was pale and tense. "Sir," she said breathlessly, "there's a man at the front gate. He says he's Meline and Noah's legal guardian. He has documents." Daniel's chest tightened. He stood up at once, his voice sharp. "Where are the kids?" "In the garden with their tutor." "Should I bring them in quietly?" "No. Keep them inside, away from the windows." From his study window, Daniel saw a figure pacing near the front lawn, just beyond the security gate, like a caged beast. Derek Holmes, sunburned, unkempt, radiating hostility even from a distance. In one hand, he gripped a folder. The other waved at the security cameras as he shouted. Daniel met him at the front entrance, flanked by 2 security guards. "Well, well," Derek sneered, taking in Daniel's tailored slacks and crisp white shirt. "Look at you, Mr. Moneybags. Playing house with my kids. Adorable." "They're not your children," Daniel replied, voice calm but hard. "And they're not going back with you," Derek laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. He tossed the folder at Daniel. "Court appointed. Guardianship signed, sealed, legal. You don't return them, you're a kidnapper." Daniel opened the folder. The documents appeared official, judge's signature, state seal, but something about them felt hasty. Off. "You don't deserve them," Daniel said. "They're terrified. I've seen the signs. You hurt them." Derek's grin widened, his yellowed teeth showing. "Prove it. Kids get bruises. Kids get scared, especially broke ones. Maybe they cried a little. But they're mine. And if you want to keep pretending you're daddy, it's gonna cost you." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" $2 million, Derek said, stepping closer. His voice dropped to a hiss. "You pay me $2 million, and I walk. Otherwise, I go to the press, the courts, the cops. I'll burn you to the ground. And don't think they won't believe me. I raised those kids." From inside the house, a cry rang out. "Noah!" The voice was high, panicked. The boy must have seen Derek through a window. Daniel didn't flinch, but inside he was seething. "Get off my property," he growled through clenched teeth. Derek chuckled. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Westbrook. I grew up on the streets. I know how to make threats feel like promises. And those kids? They're worth every cent. Meline pulls in $50 a day when she looks hungry enough. Noah, 30, minimum. That's steady cash." Daniel stepped forward, fury burning in his eyes. "Leave. Now." Derek backed away slowly, still smirking. "This isn't over, rich boy. Not even close." And with that, he disappeared into the sweltering Nevada sun, leaving behind a silence far more dangerous than his threats. The next morning carried a heavy tension as Daniel sat at the breakfast table with his daughters and the 2 foster children. The soft clinking of spoons on cereal bowls was the only sound until Daniel's phone buzzed violently. He glanced at the screen. Dozens of missed calls. Floods of unread messages. His stomach dropped. Breaking. Billionaire CEO accused of kidnapping. Foster children, a photo of Derek Holmes, red-eyed, face twisted in fake grief, plastered every major news outlet. He stood outside Daniel's estate, arms raised dramatically like a man in mourning. "He just took them," Derek sobbed on Channel 7 News, a clip that had already gone viral. "Those children are my world. I raised them after their mama died. We might not have money, but we have love. That man thinks his wealth gives him the right to take people's kids." Daniel's hand clenched around his phone. "He's twisting everything," he muttered, voice sharp. "Dad?" Lily asked softly, brows drawn. "Why are people saying bad things about you?" Daniel forced a smile, though it didn't touch his eyes. "Because sometimes when people lie well enough, others believe them." By noon, protesters had gathered outside the Westbrook Pediatric Center. They shouted through megaphones, waving signs that read, "Rich doesn't mean right," and "Bring the kids home." Miranda, Daniel's longtime assistant, stood in his office doorway. Her usually steady expression was clouded with concern. "The media's swarming," she said. "Board members are panicking. They're worried this will derail the hospital expansion." She paused. "And tonight's the Children's Fund Gala. The mayor's attending. So are most of our biggest donors. It's complicated. I'm not hiding, Daniel said, standing. And I'm not abandoning Malene and Noah. That evening, the grand ballroom at the Palmer House Hotel glowed beneath glittering chandeliers, but the air buzzed with judgment. Daniel walked in wearing a sharp black tuxedo, but the usual warm greetings were gone. Instead, he felt every glance, every whisper. There he is, someone muttered. The child snatcher, another voice sneered. Trying to patch a broken heart with orphans, someone chuckled. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept walking. At the bar, Mayor Patricia Reynolds approached. Known for her diplomacy, her tone was measured. Daniel, she said carefully, we need to talk. The situation with these children, it's more than just personal now. Daniel's voice remained calm. It's none of your concern. It becomes my concern, the mayor replied firmly. When it starts to threaten public projects, the hospital board is reconsidering the Southside expansion. Your name, your reputation, it's a liability right now. Daniel's response froze on his lips as he spotted a familiar figure approaching from across the ballroom. Derek Holmes, wearing an ill-fitting suit and a smug grin, held a drink in one hand and a microphone in the other. He was clearly soaking in the attention. How did he even get in? Daniel wondered bitterly. Derek walked toward him with the swagger of a man who believed he'd already won the court of public opinion. Mr. Westbrook, he called out loudly, just enough for nearby guests to hear. So glad to see you enjoying yourself while my children cry themselves to sleep. A hush swept across the ballroom. They're not your children, Daniel said calmly, though his hands trembled at his sides. And they're not going back with you. Oh, Derek said, scoffing. Funny, because Malene tells me she prays every night that you'll let her come home. And Noah? Poor Noah, still jumping at every loud sound. Bet he feels real safe in your big fancy mansion, huh? Daniel took a step forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs. They are safe now. Safe from someone who treated them like property, not people. His phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Paris, the house manager. Noah having panic attack. He saw Derek on TV. Please come home. Daniel didn't hesitate. He turned away from Derek, from the mayor, from one of the year's most important galas, and walked toward the exit. Running away, Derek shouted after him, sneering. That's what guilty men do. But Daniel didn't look back. He no longer cared what the elite thought. All that mattered was getting back to his children. The mansion was quiet when he returned, except for the faint notes of a piano drifting from the music room where Lily and Hannah were teaching Grace, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Daniel, sitting in his study, tried to focus on architectural blueprints, but his thoughts wouldn't settle. Doubt had crept in, and it refused to leave. The DNA test had confirmed Grace was his daughter, identical in every genetic way to Lily and Hannah. But the moment Charles had returned, everything began to shift. It started during a tense board meeting. Charles slid a folder across the table with a smug grin. I've done some digging of my own, he said casually, as though revealing a family-shattering secret was a routine audit. There are disturbing inconsistencies in this Grace situation. Daniel's hands tightened as he opened the folder. Inside were high-resolution photos. Grace's guardian, Rose, seen with a man who looked disturbingly similar to Daniel. One showed them walking into a clinic. Another showed them standing close in a park. The man had the same sharp jawline, the same dark hair, even the same tense furrow in his brow. Charles leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel like a hawk. This man was frequently seen with Rose. The resemblance to you. Uncanny, yes. But DNA testing isn't perfect. Maybe Grace only looks like Lily and Hannah for a different reason. The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Board members shifted, in their seats, glancing between each other. What exactly are you implying? Daniel asked, his voice strained. I'm not implying, Charles replied smoothly. I'm offering a possibility. That Rose used this man's resemblance to you to manipulate you when you were vulnerable. Maybe Grace isn't your daughter. At all. Daniel slammed the folder shut. You're twisting the truth. Am I? Charles said, his tone turning cold. Because I've contacted the orphanage Grace was supposedly registered with. They have no records. Not under Rose's name, not under Grace's, nothing. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. Could it be? Had he been so desperate for a connection to his late wife, so hungry for healing, that he'd let himself believe something that wasn't true? That evening, golden sunlight bathed the estate in warmth. Daniel sat in the conservatory, watching, through the glass as the girls played. Grace was laughing while Lily and Hannah helped her roller skate along the cobbled path. Their laughter rang out, pure and identical, but Charles's words lingered like poison. What if it's all a lie? The doubt spread like cracks in glass. When Grace reached up to hug him after a fall, Daniel hesitated. When she called him Dad, he questioned whether it was love or manipulation. It was subtle, but Grace noticed. She began retreating. By week's end, she stopped sleeping in her bed. Her rabbit plush, once placed proudly on her pillow, now stayed clutched tight in her arms. She barely ate. Her eyes grew dim. One night, her screams shattered the quiet. Daniel rushed to her room and found her curled in the corner, trembling. "He's coming back," she cried. "The man with the silver hair. He told Grandma Rose she had to stop lying, or he'd make her disappear." Daniel's breath caught. "What lies, sweetheart?" I don't know," Grace whispered, shaking harder. "Rose just said we had to keep secrets, that it kept us safe." Daniel held her tightly, guilt crashing over him like a wave. She was terrified, and he had doubted her. He had let Charles infect his trust. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a message that chilled him to the bone. DNA lab that processed Grace's results under investigation for inconsistencies. Suggest second test at neutral site. Charles Daniel stared at the message, his chest tightening. Was Charles trying to reveal the truth, or bury it deeper? And more painfully, was Daniel about to lose Grace all over again? That evening, Daniel stood at the edge of his office balcony, his eyes unfocused as the Las Vegas skyline pulsed in the distance. Life in the city continued, but his own world had never felt so uncertain. He held the original DNA report in one hand and the envelope Charles had given him in the other. Inside were timelines, photographs, receipts, documents that sought to destroy everything Daniel believed. The photos showed Rose with the mystery man again. His resemblance to Daniel was frightening. Charles claimed this was Grace's real father, someone Rose had known in California. The folder included notes, receipts, even a forged birth certificate naming the man as Grace's legal parent. "You've been manipulated," Charles had told him. Rose Martinez had a history, mental instability, delusions, a homeless child, latches onto a fantasy. It happens. At the time, Daniel had shoved the folder aside in disgust. "She looks exactly like Lily and Hannah," he had said. "She's not a fantasy, she's family." But now, in the stillness of the night, doubt crept in like smoke. Could it really be true? Could he have opened his heart to a stranger? Laughter floated in from the sunroom. Grace was playing a board game with the twins. Their giggles were bright, genuine. After weeks of tension, it finally sounded like they were becoming sisters. And yet, Daniel couldn't walk back inside. His chest was tight, his hands slightly trembling. Everything he had done, bringing Grace home, enrolling her in school, loving her, was built on one thing: certainty. The certainty that she was his. But what if she wasn't? That night, during a quiet session with Dr. Sarah Hamilton, the family's trusted psychologist, Daniel finally let the words escape. "I'm questioning the DNA results," he said, his voice cracked and low. "Charles showed me evidence that Rose might have made everything up. What if Grace isn't my daughter?" Sarah didn't answer right away. She folded her hands and met his eyes gently. "Would that change how you feel about her?" she asked. Daniel didn't respond. He stared at the floor, guilt gnawing at him. He wanted to say no, that he would love her regardless. But deep down, he wasn't sure. And that doubt haunted him. The fallout came fast. Grace sensed the change immediately. The next morning, she sat quietly at the breakfast table, pushing food around on her plate while Lily and Hannah chatted about a school project. Daniel tried to smile at her. She didn't smile back. Her eyes were guarded again, like she was waiting for something to be taken away. That night, the nightmares returned. Daniel woke to the sound of screaming and bolted down the hallway. He found Grace curled on the floor, gasping for air. "He's coming back," she sobbed. "The man with the silver hair. He told Rose he'd take me away if she didn't stop lying." Daniel knelt beside her, trying to keep his voice calm. "What lies, Grace? What did Rose say?" I don't know," Grace whimpered. "She just said we had to keep secrets to stay safe. She was always scared of him." Daniel felt his blood go cold. The man with silver hair. There was no doubt in his mind Grace was talking about Charles. And even though every logical part of him wanted to chalk it up to fear and trauma, there was another part that couldn't ignore what was now glaring him in the face. Just after 6 a.m., Daniel's phone rang, piercing the stillness of the early morning. He was standing on the balcony of the Westbrook estate, watching the first rays of sunlight creep over the horizon. His thoughts were stuck on Grace, on the way she hadn't called him Dad in 2 days, on her fading smile. The number on the screen was unknown. Something in his gut told him to answer. "Mr. Westbrook?" A soft, hesitant female voice came through. "This is Dr. Ella Myers. I used to work at Mercy Memorial Hospital. I knew Rose Martinez, Grace's grandmother." Daniel straightened. "I know that name. You worked with Rose?" "I did," she confirmed. "And I saw the news stories about Grace. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said a long time ago." There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice cracked. "Rose wasn't lying, Mr. Westbrook. She was telling the truth. I was there the night your triplets were born." Daniel froze. "Excuse me? You didn't just have twins," Dr. Myers said, her voice trembling. "There were 3 babies. I assisted in the delivery. The 3rd baby, Grace, was healthy. But a few hours later, the head administrator, Tom Grant, altered the records." Daniel's heart thundered in his chest. "Why?" "Because Charles Westbrook paid him $50,000 to erase any mention of the 3rd baby," she said. "I overheard it. I even saw the receipt. When Rose tried to stop it, he threatened to fire her, take her pension, have her declared mentally unstable. That's why she left with Grace. She was trying to protect her." Daniel's knees gave out. He had to grip the balcony railing to stay upright. "I didn't say anything because I was scared," Dr. Myers admitted. "But I can't carry it anymore. Not after seeing that little girl's face on TV, confused, scared. She belongs with you." Daniel's voice trembled. "Can you prove it?" "I can. I kept the delivery records, the transfer receipt. I even have a recording. It's old, but I made it the day after. It's Charles talking to Grant about covering up the 3rd baby. I'll meet you today. There's a diner on Claymont Avenue, 8 a.m. Daniel arrived 20 minutes early, his heart pounding so hard it echoed in his ears. The sun wasn't fully up, but the weight of the moment pressed on him like the noonday heat. When Dr. Myers entered, she looked exactly as he remembered, a woman in her early 60s, silver hair, tired eyes that had seen too much. She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Everything's in here," she said. "The logs show baby A, B, and C. Then suddenly baby C disappears from the record. The receipt has Charles's name and signature. And this?" She placed a small voice recorder on the table. Its screen flickered, old but functional. "This is what I heard." Daniel pressed play. Charles's voice came through, muffled, but unmistakably his. "Make sure the records say twins. If she asks questions, we'll say she was hallucinating from the meds. Rose is unstable. We'll start rumors. We only need 2 heirs. 3 makes things messy." Daniel's hands trembled as the words filled the quiet space. Rage twisted inside him, but beneath it was a deeper pain. A hollow, shattering betrayal that clawed at his chest. This wasn't just about records. Charles had stolen a life, a mother's truth, a father's right to love his child. He created everything, Daniel muttered. The photos, the doubts, even the second DNA lab. He tried to push me into using it. Dr. Myers nodded solemnly. He planned it, all of it. Daniel stared down at the folder. His clenched fingers had creased its edges. Inside it was the truth, undeniable and vile. He closed his eyes. Grace's laughter played in his memory. That shy little smile she gave Lily during their first game of tag. The way she clung to that stuffed rabbit like it was the last remaining piece of her past. She always belonged with us, he whispered. She'll never feel alone again. I promise you that. Dr. Myers exhaled, tears rising in her eyes. Then Rose didn't protect her in vain. Outside, the city began to stir. But for Daniel Westbrook, everything had already changed. Daniel stood in the grand marble kitchen of the Westbrook estate, his heart pounding beneath the starched cotton of his shirt. In one hand, he held a USB drive containing the recording that shattered every remaining illusion about Charles. In the other, the original birth records and payment receipts, evidence so clear it left no room for debate. Across the room sat the man who had orchestrated it all. Charles Westbrook was perched at the breakfast bar, leisurely sipping an espresso like he owned the moment. He wore a custom-fitted charcoal suit, his silver hair neatly combed back, his posture relaxed. But his presence sent a chill through the air. "Good morning, Daniel," Charles said with a smirk. "You look awful." "Rough night?" Daniel said. "Nothing." He walked over slowly, deliberately, and placed the manila folder and USB on the counter. "I know what you did," he said quietly. Charles raised an eyebrow. "You'll have to be more specific." "I've done a lot of things." Daniel tapped his phone. The recording played. Vincent's voice echoed from the speaker. 3 babies become 2. If anyone asks, Rose Martinez had mental issues. She's unreliable. The kitchen fell silent. The words rang like bullets through the air. For the first time, Charles's eyes narrowed, not with surprise, but with recognition. "I have the delivery records," Daniel said, voice steady. "I have the payment receipt. And now, I have your voice, planning how to erase Grace. You don't just falsify documents," he continued. "You ruined lives." Charles set his espresso down carefully. "That's proof of nothing," he said, trying to sound smooth. "Old audio can be doctored, you know that." But the mask was cracking. Daniel could see it. The flicker of calculation, the same cold detachment Grace had described in her sleep. The man who once stood beside her crib wasn't family. He was the one who made her disappear. From the hallway came the sound of small footsteps. Lily and Hannah entered, chatting happily about a Lego castle they were planning to build. Grace followed, hugging her rabbit tightly. She froze when she saw Charles. Her face went pale and she stepped back. "That's him," she whispered, clutching the toy closer. "The man who scared Grandma Rose." Without a word, Lily and Hannah stepped to her side, each one taking one of Grace's hands. The 3 girls stood together, triplets, identical in every detail. Charles stared at them. 3 girls he had tried so hard to reduce to 2. "Get out," Daniel said, his voice low but unwavering. Charles stood, slow and deliberate. "You think this changes anything?" he said. "I built this empire before you knew how to tie your shoes. Sophia doesn't belong here." "She does," Lily said, her voice sharp. "She's our sister." "She belongs with us," Hannah added, squeezing Grace's hand tighter. Charles turned to leave, but not without one final warning. "This isn't over, Daniel. You've opened a door you can't shut. You'll regret this." The door slammed. Behind him. But the room didn't feel lighter. If anything, it felt heavier, filled with a silence that knew the war wasn't finished. Daniel knelt and pulled the girls into his arms, holding them close in a trembling embrace. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're safe now." But deep inside he knew the truth. Safety, in Charles Westbrook's world, was only temporary. He had exposed the truth. And in doing so, he had made himself a target. Charles had spent decades engineering a legacy. Daniel had just pulled the foundation from beneath it. Men like Charles didn't back down. He looked at the girls. Grace was still shaking, but she didn't pull away. Her eyes, those Westbrook blue eyes, met his with cautious trust. "I promise you," Daniel whispered, "no one will ever hurt you again." And for the first time since finding Grace, Daniel truly meant it. Not as a promise of comfort, but as a declaration of war. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the glass walls of Westbrook Foundation headquarters as Daniel stood at the head of the boardroom table, briefing his executive team on the steps to formally remove Charles from the company. His voice was calm but unwavering. Every lie Charles had told, every threat he'd made, every layer of manipulation, it had all led to this moment. Today, Daniel would begin the process of cleaning up the mess his uncle had left behind. Then his phone buzzed. It was Principal Hicks from the girls' private academy, and her voice trembled with urgency. "Mr. Westbrook, there's been an incident." Daniel's chest tightened. "What kind of incident?" he asked. "The girls, Lily, Hannah, and Grace, they're gone." The words hit him like a blow. "What do you mean, gone?" Daniel demanded, already pushing himself up from the table, his chair crashing behind him. "They were on a field trip to the Science Museum," the principal explained frantically. 3 men in suits arrived with forged emergency papers. They claimed there was a family emergency and took the girls. By the time we verified with your office, they were already gone. Daniel went numb. He couldn't hear the gasps around the room, couldn't feel the dozens of eyes glued to him, as he bolted from the boardroom. All he could hear was the deafening roar of panic and rage pounding in his ears. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a blocked number. One message lit the screen. "Riverside Warehouse. Dock 7. Come alone, or they disappear forever." Seconds later, another message followed. "Bring the signed documents." 30% of Westbrook Enterprises transferred to Charles Westbrook. No police, no FBI. 1 hour. Daniel didn't have time to think. He knew instantly this was Charles's final move. One more desperate, vile attempt to take what never belonged to him. He called Miranda immediately. "Get the legal team together. Now, draft a fake transfer agreement. Make it look real. I need a decoy to buy time." "Should we alert the FBI?" she asked, breathless. Daniel paused. Then his voice hardened. "Loop them in, but quietly. Have them trace my phone. But tell them to stay back until I say so. If Charles suspects anything, he'll disappear with the girls." The drive to the docks felt endless. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind raced with memories. Lily's goofy laugh, Hannah's ballet twirls, Grace's shy smile the first time she called him Daddy. He had nearly lost her once. He wouldn't lose any of them again. The warehouse loomed ahead, rusted and lifeless, its skeleton of metal and chains echoing with silence. Dock 7 stood still, the only sound the faint thud of Daniel's footsteps. From the shadows, Charles emerged, flanked by 3 armed men. He looked disturbingly calm, his silver hair slicked back, a manic gleam in his eyes. "Welcome, nephew," he said smoothly, like he was inviting Daniel to brunch. "I trust you came alone." Daniel didn't respond. His eyes scanned past him, searching for the girls. Charles reached into his coat and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen, revealing grainy security footage. Lily, Hannah, and Grace huddled in a dim, locked room. "They're alive. For now," Charles said coldly. "That warehouse is soundproofed. No one will hear them scream if things go south." Daniel's fists clenched. "Sign over 30% of the company and they go free," Charles continued, venom dripping from every word. "That's all I've ever wanted. What's fair? What's mine?" Daniel slowly pulled out the forged documents Miranda's team had prepared. "Let me see them first. I want to know they're safe." Charles narrowed his eyes. "Don't play games with me, Daniel. You sign, then they go. Inside the cold, silent room, the air reeked of rust and seawater. Grace Westbrook sat huddled between Lily and Hannah, their backs pressed against the icy concrete wall. Hours had passed since the heavy metal door had slammed shut. Only a thin ray of light filtered in from the vent above. Lily shivered beside her. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," Hannah added, hugging her knees. "I don't understand how he found us." Grace didn't respond right away. Her eyes were locked on the ventilation grate, her expression hardening, not with fear, but focus. "Rose taught me things," she said softly. Lily turned to her. "What do you mean?" Grace's fingers found the locket Daniel had placed around her neck, the one that had belonged to her grandmother. "She told me sometimes bad men take kids. And if it ever happened, I had to be smart. I had to remember everything she taught me." The memory of Rose's voice echoed in her mind like wind in the leaves. "Always look for a way out, my little fox. And if you can't find one, make one." Grace stood slowly, scanning the room. Concrete walls, no windows, no clear exits except the vent. "There," she pointed. "It's big enough. I think I can fit." Lily and Hannah stood beside her, confused but willing. "How do we get up there?" Hannah asked. "We make a ladder," Grace replied calmly, startling both of them with her composure. She knelt down and laced her fingers together. "Step on me." Lily climbed first, then helped Hannah up. Together they boosted Grace until she could reach the grate. Her fingers moved quickly, probing the edges. "Rose always carried a bobby pin for emergencies," she whispered, pulling one from her own hair. She twisted it into the screw heads, loosening them one by one. Her heart pounded. Every creak felt like thunder. With a final twist, the grate popped free and clattered gently to the floor. Grace pulled herself up and looked through the shaft. "What do you see?" Lily asked anxiously from below. Grace's eyes adjusted to the low light. The duct ran forward, then dropped into another room. Faint dripping water, distant voices. "We're near the docks," she confirmed, just like the silver-haired man said. "Do you think anyone can hear us?" Hannah asked. "Maybe," Grace said, reaching inside her locket. There was something else in there. Something she had never let go. A tiny silver whistle. The emergency whistle Rose had given her. "It carries farther than voices," she whispered. Without hesitation, she brought it to her lips and blew. 3 sharp, piercing blasts echoed through the vents and out into the warehouse. Then silence. "Is it working?" Lily asked. Grace didn't answer. She was already scraping something into the metal wall with a jagged piece of concrete she had picked up from the floor. She carved out the words, "Dock 7. Help us." Below it, she added a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. "Why are you doing that?" Hannah asked, wide-eyed. "In case someone sees it," Grace said, "or in case we don't get out. They'll know we were here." Lily and Hannah stared at her, amazed. "You're really brave," Lily whispered. "I'm not brave," Grace said, sliding down beside them. "I'm just doing what Rose taught me." Back on the floor, the 3 girls regrouped. Grace pulled them close. "There's one more thing," she said. "Rose said bad men have patterns. They check on people at regular times. That's when we move." "Move?" Hannah asked nervously. "Run," Grace answered, her eyes flashing with fierce determination that made her look just like Daniel in a crisis. "We wait for the next time someone opens that door. They won't expect us to fight. That's when we strike." "But what if they catch us?" Lily asked, trembling. "Then we try again," Grace said firmly. "And again. We don't give up. That's what Rose always said." Hannah leaned her head on Grace's shoulder. "I'm really glad you're our sister." "Me too," Lily said, wrapping her arm around Grace. For a few quiet seconds, the 3 girls sat together in a triangle of warmth, the cold surrounding them. The dim light above them buzzed faintly. Outside the door, footsteps approached. Grace reached for the whistle again. Daniel Westbrook stood beneath the dim industrial lights of Dock 7, the ransom note still trembling in his hand. The warehouse smelled of rust, oil, and the nearby river. Across from him stood Charles Westbrook, polished, cold, and wearing that same air of superiority Daniel had seen his whole life. Behind Charles, 3 armed men loomed beside a black van, its engine humming. Somewhere inside that building, locked away and terrified, were Lily, Hannah, and Grace, his daughters, all 3 of them, his entire world. Charles folded his arms, smirking. "You've got 5 minutes to decide, Daniel," he said, his voice echoing through the empty space. "Sign over 30% of Westbrook Technologies, or say goodbye to the girls forever." Daniel's heart thundered. This company, his father's legacy, had once meant everything, but now, it meant nothing. Not compared to those 3 little girls trapped somewhere behind that steel and silence. He looked at the man who used to be his mentor, now revealed as a monster behind years of lies. "You stole my daughter," Daniel said, his teeth clenched. "You destroyed Rose. You nearly broke all of us." Charles chuckled, amused by his nephew's fury. "I protected the legacy. Don't be naive. 3 heirs? That was never part, see, of the plan. One child was disposable. Your wife became an inconvenience. I did what had to be done." Daniel's jaw clenched. His hand hovered over the pen as he stared down at the contract Charles had laid out. Documents that would hand over 1/3 of the company permanently into his uncle's control. His stomach twisted. Then his phone buzzed. He didn't even know why he checked it. Habit, maybe. Or instinct. A single message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. "Dad. Grace found a way out. Dock 7. Vent system. We're trying to escape. Lily." His heart stopped. This wasn't a hallucination. It was real. One of the girls had a phone. They were alive. They were trying to escape. Daniel looked up at Charles, forcing himself to stay composed. "You know what, Uncle?" he said, voice steady. "You're right about what matters. But you never understood what that actually was." Charles's smirk faltered just slightly. "Sign it," he snapped. "Now." "You spent years manipulating me," Daniel said, ignoring the pen entirely. "You erased Grace's name from history. You let Jessica die because she asked too many questions. And you did all of that for a piece of paper, for control." Charles stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Control is what builds empires, Daniel." "No," Daniel replied, voice low. "Love does. Family does." Charles's face twisted into a sneer. "Touching but pointless. Your daughters are running out of time." Daniel's phone buzzed again, almost out. "Grace remembers Rose's lessons. Vent leads to dock doors. Hold him." Lily, Daniel's breath caught. He looked up at Charles, who now looked visibly agitated. "You underestimated her," Daniel said, calmly. "Grace, you thought she'd be helpless." "She is helpless," Charles snapped. Daniel met his eyes. "No, she's Rose's granddaughter. That makes her a fighter." Suddenly, Charles lunged forward and grabbed Daniel by the collar. "You're bluffing." "Call your men," Daniel challenged. "Check on the girls. Go ahead." Charles turned, barking into his radio. "Status?" "Static." Then a frantic voice. "Cut through. Boss, they're gone. The room's empty. Vent covers off. They're not in there." Color drained from Charles's face. Daniel exhaled. "Just once. You lost. Find them," Charles roared, spinning toward his men. "Search every damn inch of this place." But it was already too late. Sirens screamed in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed against the steel walls of the warehouse. FBI, SWAT, dozens of boots thundered across the docks. Charles whirled back around and pulled a gun from beneath his coat. "You think this is over?" he growled, pointing the weapon at Daniel. "You have no idea what I've done, or what I'm willing to do." "I know everything," Daniel said, slowly raising his hands. "You confessed to it all. My phone's been recording since the moment I walked in." Charles's hand trembled. Shouts rang out behind them. "FBI, drop your weapon." From the edge of the dock, Daniel saw them, 3 small figures running through the mist. Lily, Hannah, Grace, Alive, dirty, crying, safe, Daddy! Grace's voice rang out, bright and clear, slicing through the cold air and chaos like a ray of sunlight. Charles turned toward the sound. In that instant, Daniel saw it, the twitch of a finger, the shift in posture. Without hesitation, he tackled him. The gun fired once, straight into the air. They hit the ground hard. Daniel's knee slammed against the concrete. Charles thrashed beneath him, snarling like a wild animal, but the gun skittered across the floor, out of reach. Within seconds, FBI agents surrounded them. They pinned Charles down, yanked his arms behind his back. Daniel stood, breath heaving, just in time to catch his daughters as they barreled into his arms. Lily clung to his waist. Grace buried her face in his shoulder. Hannah sobbed into his chest. "You saved us," Daniel whispered. "No, Daddy," Grace said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "We saved each other." And in that moment, surrounded by sirens, broken glass, and the ruins of betrayal, Daniel Westbrook knew he hadn't just rescued his daughters, they had saved him too. 1 year had passed since that day, since Daniel Westbrook almost lost everything. He stood barefoot on the soft grass in the backyard of their new home, a place full of warmth and light, a space that had replaced the cold grandeur of the old Westbrook estate. This new house wasn't as large, wasn't as polished, but it felt more like home than any mansion ever had. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting gold across the yard. Laughter echoed in the air, mixed with the playful barks of their puppy Rosie. Lily, Hannah, and Grace chased her through the garden, their identical faces glowing with joy. Once, those faces had been shadowed by pain, confusion, and guarded silence. Now they radiated freedom. Daniel watched them, his heart swelling. They were 10 now. Just a year ago, Grace had been homeless, lost on the streets, unaware of her own identity. A year ago, Lily and Hannah didn't know they had a sister. And Daniel, he had believed his family was already whole. He had no idea what destiny was about to hand him. "Higher, Daddy," Grace squealed as she jumped onto the backyard swing he'd built with his own hands. Her voice, full of light, cut through his memories like sun through storm clouds. Daniel smiled, walked over, and gave her a push. "Hold on tight," he warned, teasing. "I trust you," Grace called back, laughing. That simple sentence gripped Daniel's heart tighter than any accolade, any business triumph. A gentle voice joined from behind him. "Hard to believe they're 10 today," said Dr. Sarah Hamilton, the girls' therapist, now a close family friend. She carried a pastel birthday cake, its frosting soft and sweet, topped with 10 glowing candles. "Time flies," Daniel replied, helping Grace down from the swing. He looked toward the picnic table, covered in colorful streamers and hand-drawn birthday cards. "Feels like just yesterday she was too afraid to sleep in a bed." "She's come so far," Sarah said, setting the cake down. "All of them have." Daniel nodded, watching Grace pull her sisters into a secret huddle. They giggled, whispering about the surprise they had planned for him. "They're stronger than I ever imagined," he said softly. "You gave them the chance to be," Sarah replied. "You gave them a family." Daniel smiled, his throat tight with emotion. "And they gave me more than I ever deserved." Over the past year, Daniel had stepped down from leading Westbrook Innovations. The company thrived under a new CEO, someone Daniel had personally mentored. But he had no regrets. For the first time in decades, he wasn't rushing from boardroom to boardroom. He woke up to his daughter's laughter. He read bedtime stories, packed lunches, learned to braid hair, though his attempts still brought giggles. He kissed scraped knees. He'd found the kind of wealth that truly mattered. The family had also launched the Jessica Rose Foundation, named after Grace's beloved guardian and Daniel's late wife. Its mission was simple: reunite children with families and expose the systemic failures that had once torn Grace from her sisters. In just 12 months, they had helped over 100 children find safe homes. Justice had been served too. Charles Westbrook, once a towering figure in Daniel's life, was now behind bars, convicted of child abduction, conspiracy, and the murders of Rose Martinez and Jessica Westbrook. His cold-blooded plan to seize control of the Westbrook legacy had collapsed under the weight of his own madness. Daniel sometimes wondered if Charles had ever loved anyone besides himself. He chose power, Daniel reminded himself. I chose family. "Daddy, come here," Lily called from beneath the big oak tree. The girls had uncovered something in the flower bed. When Daniel joined them, he saw it. A small tin box, covered in dirt, faded stickers peeling from the lid. "It's our time capsule," Hannah exclaimed. Excited, they opened it together. Inside were drawings, rough but full of heart. 3 little girls holding hands. Above them, 2 glowing angel figures, one with flowing blonde hair, Jessica, the other, gentle-eyed, in a nurse's uniform, Rose. "Do you think they're proud of us?" Grace asked quietly, her hand resting on the picture. "I know they are," Daniel said, pulling all 3 girls into his arms. "Your mom would be amazed at how brave and kind you've all become. And Rose, she'd be so happy to see you safe, home, and loved." The girls squeezed tighter into his embrace. "I used to think I had everything," Daniel whispered. "The company, the money, control. But the truth is, I didn't have anything until I had you 3. "Does that mean we're your legacy?" Hannah asked, her eyes shining. He smiled and brushed her hair back. "The only one that ever mattered." The sun slipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. Fireflies flickered across the yard. The girls ran to grab sparklers, Rosie barking as she chased the last traces of light. Sarah stood beside Daniel, arms folded, watching them with a soft smile. "You changed their lives," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her, eyes full of gratitude. "They changed mine first." A breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Daniel closed his eyes and felt something deeper than peace settle in his chest. Not victory, not relief, something sacred. Wholeness. Love had rebuilt what loss, betrayal, and greed had once torn apart. And as he opened his eyes to see Lily, Hannah, and Grace dancing barefoot beneath the stars, Daniel Westbrook finally understood. This was the life he had been searching for all along. We'd love to hear what you think. Leave a comment below and rate this story from 10 to 100. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. And if this one touched your heart, check out more uplifting videos by clicking the end screen now.